So we have an exciting couple of days, an extraordinary assemblage of speakers. But you know, as you think about any movement, any change movement, we all stand on the shoulders of those who came before us. And we carry forward their wisdom, if we're lucky, and their counsel and their accomplishments, and we build upon that. And at CARE, I stand upon the journeys and the commitments and the leadership of thousands of people, but most specifically, I stand upon the shoulders of those who were my immediate predecessors, Phil Johnson and Peter Bell, and most recently, Helene Gayle. I know that many of you all know Helene. She wasn't just the face of CARE for almost a decade. She was its conscience, she was its chief motivator, she was its architect. She's had a career that spans 30 plus years of leadership, tackling global health and development at the CDC, leading in the philanthropic sector with Bill and Melinda Gates to overcome AIDS as a global pandemic, reimagining the sector with the McKinsey Social Initiative, and today she's leading domestically as president and CEO of the Chicago Community Trust. Everywhere that she's gone, she has created extraordinary change, and I'm so glad to be in a conversation with her. So please join me in welcoming and celebrating Helene Gayle.
Like being home again.
I know, it's like a reunion. I have to say that one of the first, actually the very first conference that I ever came to, Helene told me that this was one of her favorite times of the year. It was like a holiday because it is literally an antidote to cynicism to be a part of this gathering.
No, Fab, it is. It was always my very favorite. And to see people who come as volunteers to use their voice to make a difference and spread the important news of why it's important for us as Americans to care about the rest of the world. It is fabulous. So it's just wonderful to be back here with all of you.
Oh, we're glad to have you home. So speaking of home, you have shifted your orientation over this last few months as you've joined the Chicago Community Trust to domestic issues, specifically focused in Chicago. So I'm wondering how you're taking in your international global experience and applying that domestically and what you're learning and what you're seeing.
Yeah, well, you know, when people ask me what I'm doing, my shorthand version is I've taken what I did at CARE and take it to the local level, because I do think there's so many parallels. And, you know, while in our global work we think about inequities between countries and also within countries, you know, I think there's still so many unexcusable inequities here in our own country. And so the ability to take some of what I had learned in my career working around the world and think about how do you take some of those same lessons. And I think these issues around girls and women are first and foremost in many ways, and I think, you know, what's going on here domestically with Me Too and you know, looking at these issues of women and girls domestically, I think really dovetails very much with the work that we've always done at CARE.
And are you seeing, as you think about the issues that you're dealing with in terms of endemic poverty or gender-based violence, can you draw direct lines?
Well, you know, I think, you know, clearly there are differences, but I think one of the things, and again, it's why I think this whole Me Too is so important, not only here in the United States, but around the world, is that it's not just about what's happening to girls and women, but it's also about power dynamics more broadly. And how do we really start taking seriously the need to shift power dynamics? Because if we don't do that, it's not only going to have an impact on girls and women and gender inequality, but it's also what is continuing to fuel inequality here in this country and around the world. So I think this movement that's being created that is really helping to shift the power dynamics is hugely important. And I'd be curious, kind of in reverse, how are you seeing, you know, the Me Too movement here, and what is that doing for the work that you're doing at CARE?
Well, I think as we see women lift up their voices around this country and bring to our attention issues of gender-based violence and also sexual harassment in the workplace, I keep thinking of and sort of saying, okay, if we now are clear about how difficult it can be on the couch of the producer in Hollywood, think about what it means to be on the factory floor in Bangladesh.
Yeah.
Or the streets of the souk in Cairo. And so one of the questions that we're asking ourselves at CARE, and that I hope that all of you all will contribute to in terms of our carrying forward this movement, is how do we give voice to those women, and how do we bring attention to that? And I think you know this, Helene, but we did a survey with 8 different countries, and it told us not only, first of all, that we have serious issues around the world. Actually, a quarter of the people in 8 countries, I should say, I think it was a quarter of the men in the survey, said that it was okay to force an employee who worked for you to have sex with you. In Egypt, it was 63%. And so if you think about that, but then you also think about what will change that, and 65% of the people in the poll said that they thought the Me Too movement could change the circumstances globally and internationally for them.
Yeah.
And so I think that is hopeful, but how do we break through in terms of the headlines, and how do we build a global movement, which is why we're excited about some of the things we're going to be talking about over the next few days.
No, and it reminds me, this is one of my very early CARE visits, and we do the site visits, and then I would always spend time with the staff. And I remember a young woman, one of our employees, coming up asking me during the question and answer with the staff, how did I get my job? And I talked about going to school and did one thing and then the next thing and what have you, explaining my career. And then she pulled me aside afterwards and she said, I was really asking you, what did you have to do in order to get to be where you are? Because she had never seen a woman in a high-level position not get that position because of favors she had to do along the way. And it broke my heart, because this was one of our employees, and that was the world that she knew. And so I think there's so much that we need to do in our own organization, and we know, how some of this has rocked some of our sister organizations, but we need to make sure that we're thinking about what does it mean and how can we be the change that we want to be, because if we're not also thinking about how we're doing that internally, we're carrying that outward in the work that we do. So I think it's hugely important, and I think it's, as you said, I think people are starting to take a lot of inspiration from the Me Too movement, because it is having not only an impact here, but also domestically, globally. I was just going to go back to, you were asking about some of the parallels, and one of the programs that I still think is one of the real gems at CARE is the work around village savings and loans, and the empowerment that you spoke about that happens when a woman finds her worth and value through economic empowerment, and how important that is. And I think about all of the women that I met at CARE, some of those same strategies are the kinds of things we're looking at also domestically, because when you give, and sometimes it's not just a woman, it may be somebody re-entering after incarceration, or somebody else whose power has been stripped from them. Giving them that economic empowerment is so core to changing the dynamics.
Yeah. A group of our advocates, staff, and women chiefs of staff just got back from a trip to Rwanda. And they were telling me the story of sitting around a village savings and loan program, like the one that you talked about, and talking to a 16-year-old girl who was speaking about what had changed the village savings and loan program. And she had on this beautiful watch, and they asked her about it, and she said, I earned this watch myself from the savings. She said, I had a boyfriend who said that he wanted to buy me this watch. And her mentor told her, her mentor from CARE said, you don't need him to buy you this. You need to find ways of building your own capacity. And she was so proud of that. And she actually said, you know, she was putting her way through, she was not only buying a watch, she was putting her way through school, her sister through school, and she said she now tells, and she called him her lover boy. She said, I tell my lover boy, I have my own watch, I earn my own money. And so I think that that power that women can engage and they're feeling their power is so important.
Yeah, no, you know, I think we see it time and time again how that translates into shifting how a relationship continues to evolve between men and women, or looking at what happened in Niger, where all of those women are now running for political office, who started out in the very first country where we started the Village Savings and Loan Program, and they have now taken that into a mass movement. And so I think that's, you know, it's this, how do you create movements that really create long-lasting social change, I think is again, going back to Me Too, I think that's what I hope is going to evolve from that, is that it's not just a moment in time, but truly a movement that is here domestically, but also continues to move the needle internationally and globally.
So in Niger, which Helene alluded to, our incredible Village Savings and Loan Program began. And now half of the number of women that are elected, so half of the women elected in Niger have been through a CARE Village Savings and Loan Program.
Yeah, which is an incredible contribution.
It is an incredible contribution. I mean, you talk about the parallels. I love that, because we have all these women running for office today, here in the United States, and that is a pathway that we need to continue to build the foundations for internationally as well.
No, exactly. And I also think, you know, one of the things I also hope will come as a result of this is this closer connectedness to the issues of women globally. I remember when we were first starting to make that shift to put a greater focus on girls and women at CARE, and many people questioning, were we losing our mission, were we losing our focus, because people didn't necessarily understand the challenges that girls and women face around the world. But I think that this now uncovering the fact that, in fact, here in the United States, we have these same issues, you know, is a way of making it more real. And I think the more that and we were talking about this backstage, the more we start having people feel a greater sense of true community and compassion for people who may not live right next door, but are dealing with some of the same issues, that's when I think, you know, this real focus on ending global poverty is going to become a lot more real to more people.
Yeah. One of my favorite encounters as I've visited CARE projects is I met a young woman named Nasra in Somalia, and she was 16, and the project that we visited was a CARE school that we had built. And she was obviously a star. She was the star of the play, and I later found out she was the director and writer of the play as well. And she told me she walked an hour and a half to get to school every day. She was one of 5 girls, and she's the only one that was going to school. And they introduced me, and they said, this is Michelle, she's the president of CARE. CARE works in 93 countries. Somehow in the translation, it said, Michelle's the president of 92 countries. And she, without missing a beat, Nasra looked at me and said, I want to be the president of 92 countries. How do you become the president of 92 countries? And so I think about the unbounded aspiration that girls and women have around the world, and what it would look like if it was realized, if it was tapped into.
Yeah, no, exactly. And you know, it's what we always said, you can't hold back 50% of the world's potential and talent and expect that we're going to get where we should be as a world community without that kind of balance that comes with it. So keep up the good work.
Well, we have Helene to thank for so much, including our focus on women and girls at CARE. So will you all please join me in thanking Helene Gayle for an extraordinary life of service.
Thank you. Thank you.